All right, good evening, everybody. It's your boy Akeem from Pro Football Exclusive, here to give you my grades for the 2014 NFL Draft within the AFC East Division. And I'm going to start things off with the New England Patriots. They had an interesting draft, starting with their first overall pick at pick number 28 in the first round. They went with Dominique Easley, the defensive tackle coming out of Florida. Now, out of all the defensive tackle, this kid shows a lot of athleticism at this particular position, even though he's a little bit undersized as far as weight, weighing 288 pounds. But he does display a lot of skills, even though the numbers don't show too much throughout his career as a Gator. With their second round selection, they went with a quarterback in this one in Jimmy Garoppolo out of Eastern Illinois. Now, this was an interesting selection because they do have a quarterback in Ryan Mallett who's entering his fourth season. Now, because of this selection, I was kind of questioning what Bill Belichick had in mind to what they were going to use with Ryan Mallett. I think he's going to try to trade him for a late round draft selection. Their next pick came within the fourth round, in which they had 4 picks in that fourth round. Starting with their first one, Byron Stewart, the center coming out of Florida State. Now, he definitely has the brains, just like Tom Brady, the brains to work this position well at center. But as far as his physicality, he probably will play up to par. But I still think because of his brains, he will still outsmart the defenders that he has to play against. And let's not forget, he did win the nation's top center award, given to him the Remington Trophy. Sticking within the fourth round, they picked up a good running back out of Wisconsin and James White. And I think this was a great pickup to work along with Stephen Ridley as well as Shane Vereen. And we have a good young trio of running backs for this team. In the fourth round, and their last pick in the fourth round, they had Cameron Fleming, the offensive tackle out of Stanford. I think this was a good pick, as well as their next pick in the sixth round, in which they went with John Halapio coming out of Florida. Even though he's a little bit slow, he does weigh 334 pounds, and I think both of these two players can help out the offensive line. Sticking in the sixth round, they picked up a good defensive end out of Concordia in Minnesota, and Zach Moore. Now, he's coming off a little bit of a down year compared to his season back in 2012, where he posted 21 tackles for loss and 14 sacks. I think he could be a good rotation type defensive end with Chandler Jones and company for that defense. I think he should make the 53-man roster. And their last pick in the sixth round, they went with Jermaine Thomas, coming out of the safety coming out of Georgia Tech. I think this was a decent selection. When with their seventh pick, this was a surprise for me, and Jeremy Gallen coming out of Michigan. And I think this was a surprise that he was picked in the seventh round. I had him at least in the late fifth round, or at the very worst, the sixth round. But he ended up going in the seventh round, and I think this is a good pickup for the New England Patriots. Now, yes, he is undersized at 5'7", 185 pounds, but he could get the job done, especially when he was an all Big Ten performer this past season with over 1,300 yards. Now, for the grade this season, I'm gonna have to give them a B-. They don't have really any big names, but I still think they picked up a couple good decent players to replace players in the near future. Hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo can be that guy to be the successor for Tom Brady. Next team I need to talk about is the New York Jets, and they nailed it to the wall with this year's draft. They had 12 selections, and I think they had some outstanding picks, except for one particular selection, and I will get to him in just a second. Starting with their first pick, Calvin Pryor out of Louisville. Now, I made that suggestion that they should go with Calvin Pryor, and they did, to address the secondary, and I think this was a great pick. With the second round selection, they went with a good tight end to have a good receiver for the quarterbacks. Whoever is that quarterback, hopefully Geno Smith will be that starting guy. And Chase Amaro out of Texas Tech, he was a great target last season, and I think he could be a key addition and a great weapon on offense for the receiving corps. Now, their third round selection, that was the one I was a little bit like, huh? Who did you select? They went with Dexter McDougal coming out of Maryland. This was like the only pick I humbly disagree on, but hey, he might prove me wrong with this selection. Now, with the remainder of the selections, I think they did a great job. In the fourth round, they picked up 2 good receivers, and Shaq Evans out of UCLA and Jalen Saunders out of Oklahoma. I think this will definitely help out the receiving corps. Probably these two players will probably make the team and become decent receivers. And then in the 4th round, they picked up a good interior lineman and offensive tackle slash offensive guard, Dakota Dozier out of Furman. And I think he's a good versatile player, can play the tackle and the guard position. And I think this was a steal in the 4th round. I can't believe he was actually still available in this particular round. And then in the 5th round, they picked up Jeremiah George, coming out of Iowa State, who's coming off a great season, 133 tackles last year and 12 tackles for loss. Definitely a good linebacking player to work well in the linebacking core. In the 6th round, they had 3 picks, actually 4 picks in the 6th round. Starting with cornerback from Northwest Missouri State, Brandon Dixon. He has a good size at 5'11" and 203 pounds, and he did have 11 pass breakups last season. I think this was a decent pick in the 6th round. Second in the 6th round, they picked up a good out of the nowhere wide receiver out of Nebraska and Quincy and Nua. I think he's a good player. He was actually the Gator Bowl MVP last season, hauling in a big 99-yard reception in that matchup, and he actually had a school record with 12 TD receptions last season with 753 yards receiving. I think this was a great pick, and he has great size at 6'2", 225 pounds. I'm a little bit shocked that he wasn't picked earlier in this round or earlier in this year's draft because of his size and what he did as a Cornhusker this past season, breaking a school record for most receptions. Sticking within the 6th round, they picked up Ike Enupali out of the defensive end out of Louisiana Tech. Now he had 11 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks. Not too impressive, but hopefully he could do well in the defense. Hopefully he can even make the team. And with their last pick in the 6th round, they had Taj Boyd, and he was actually my number 5 quarterback coming into this year's draft. Now he was the most prolific quarterback coming out of Clemson, and I think he could probably work his way on as a backup for this team. Now he's going to be battling things out with Michael Vick as well as Geno Smith, but this is a tough competition. Right now I see Geno Smith as the front runner to be that starting quarterback, but anything can happen. Taj Boyd should be able to make this team. And with their final selection, this was another, I think this could be another good steal, and Trevor Riley out of Utah, the outside linebacker. Now, as a senior, he had 100 tackles and 16 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks. I'm a little bit shocked that he was picked late, but I still think he could become a good player for this team. Now, overall, I have to give him an A. They had a great draft, just as my personal opinion. Next team we need to talk about is the Buffalo Bills. They had a pretty decent draft. Starting with their first pick, they actually traded with the Cleveland Browns. They traded a future first-round pick as well as future picks in this year's draft, and they ended up selecting Sammy Watkins out of Clemson, the number 1 receiver headed towards this year's draft. And I think this was a big trade and a great selection and an ultimate weapon for E.J. Manuel. And let's not forget about Mike Williams. They actually traded to pick up Mike Williams from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2 good receivers to help out that receiving core and give out good, better options for E.J. Manuel. Now, for the next pick, they actually addressed the offensive line with tackle Cyrus Quandro out of Alabama. Out of Alabama. I think this is a good pick. Some people see him as a bust, but I think he's going to redeem himself and be a good interior lineman to protect E.J. Manuel. With their 3rd round pick, they went with Preston Brown, the inside linebacker coming out of Louisville. I think this was a good pick, and I did do a scout report on him. I think he's a decent player. In the 4th round, I think they had a little bit of a sleeper in cornerback Ross Cotwell out of Duke. He has great cover skills, many pass breakups, some interceptions, and I think he could cause some turnovers and even help out the secondary who lost Jarius Byrd, who is now a New Orleans Saint. In the 5th round, they picked up a good lineman and guard from Baylor, Cyrus Richardson, who was in my top 5 guards, and I think he is a good addition to help out E.J. Manuel and even embrace the offensive line. Now, with the 7th round selections, those were a little bit iffy picks. I wasn't really feeling too well with their selections. First pick, an interior lineman, and Randall Johnson, 6'2", 242 pounds, 195 career tackles, and 30 tackles for loss. Not too impressive, but the tackles for loss is pretty good, particularly with the past 2 seasons. And Seantrell Henderson coming out of the U. Now, he was one of the top prospects coming out of high school, but he was a major disappointment. That's just my opinion, and I'm really concerned if he will make the 53-man roster, but we will see. Now, because of those 2 final selections, I'm going to have to give them a solid B. Had they went with a couple of better picks in that 7th round, I think I could have gave them at least an A- or a B+, but I'm going to give them a solid B for their efforts, maybe a B+. I do like their first picks within the first 5 rounds. And then last but not least, the Miami Dolphins. Now, this was the most confusing draft class out of all the draft class entering at the end of this year's draft. Now, under new GM Dennis Hickey, he actually used the Billy Bean approach. Billy Bean was actually the general manager for the Oakland A's in the MLB. But, and I still think Hickey kind of with his approach with going for some wild card selections and going with a new direction. With their first pick, they went with an offensive tackle and tackled Jawan James coming out of Tennessee. Now, I do not think he was worth the 19th overall selection, but hey, he might be able to prove me wrong. Hopefully he does. With the second round pick, I think this was a good pick. Jarvis Landry out of LSU. He comes coming off of his best season, 77 receptions, 1,193 yards, and 10 touchdowns. A good year as an LSU Tiger under or with a refreshed quarterback, Zach Mettenberger, who is now a Tennessee Titan. With the third round pick, they went with another offensive tackle in Billy Turner out of North Dakota State. Now, for the remainder picks, they've been going after players from lower collegiate level schools. And this was one of their selections. Billy Turner, he is a decent offensive tackle, but I don't think because of the signing of Brandon Alpert, I don't think they should have went with another offensive tackle. But hey, tryouts, we'll see who's going to start at tackle between James and Turner. Turner might even be able to steal that job. And with the fourth round pick, they went with Walt Atkins, the cornerback out of Liberty. He has good size at 6 foot flat, 203 pounds, a good size cornerback. And in the fifth round, they picked up a decent tight end from Georgia, Arthur Lynch. Now, he's coming back from back-to-back 400-yard seasons and 8 touchdowns total for the last 2 years. And I think this was a decent pickup, but let's not forget about Charles Clay. He's a good H-back / tight end and a good all-purpose player. I do like Charles Clay's positional play, as well as I do kind of like this pick with Arthur Lynch. I think these two players could work well in double tight sets and even be sometimes a little bit of a threat. And second, in the fifth round, they went with a good outside linebacker out of Montana and Jordan Tripp. Now, this was an interesting selection. I think he's a good player, but another player coming from a lower competition school in Montana, the FCS division. Now, he saw a lot of action in 2009 and in 2010, but missed most of 2011, then came back in 2012 and 13, where he posted 195 tackles over the last 2 seasons. I think this was a decent pick. And then in the sixth round, they went with Matt Hazel, the receiver coming out of Coastal Carolina. Not too impressed. He did have over 900 yards this past season. But with the 7th round pick, I do have to give him some kudos. I think this was a good pick. Coming out of Marist, the defensive end, and Terrence Feet, who's coming off of his best season yet. 18 tackles for loss and 13 sacks. I think this was a good pick in the 7th round. Now, for their selections, right now, I'm gonna give them a C+ because I might see where Hickey, Dennis Hickey and the company is actually going with a new direction. They've actually picked up some wild card players with their selections, and they had the most unorthodox type of picks of this year's draft. And I'm a little bit concerned about them, but we'll see what happens. This is a team, this is a draft class where we're going to have to sit and wait. But for now, I'm going to give them a C+. I think I should really give them a C, but I'm going to give them a C+ for their effort because I do understand they're trying to go with a new direction. And like I said before, I have to give a lot of these teams respect for the selections of this year's draft. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys is tomorrow, where I'm going to go to the NFC North Division and give you my grades for that particular division. Thank you for watching today's blog from Pro Football Exclusive. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.